So far, we've covered how you need to develop not just a surface-level understanding, but a deep understanding of your target audience, the problem you're solving, and value proposition. Getting to your narrowest set of relevant users, understanding the root problem you're solving, and being able to articulate your value proposition are all key parts of identifying features that will really resonate with your core users. In this lesson, you'll develop a deep understanding of your strategic differentiation. Value proposition and strategic differentiation are often confused or even used as synonyms, so it's worth quickly clarifying the difference between the two. Whereas value proposition describes what solution you provide, strategic differentiation describes how you keep that value proposition compelling against your competitors. For example, LinkedIn's value proposition was a warmer, higher success rate way to do sales, but its strategic differentiation was its data. Competitors could not easily copy LinkedIn's ability to constantly keep its massive database of users up to date and accurate. When defining this dimension, the surface-level understanding most PMs stop at is to think only about their strategic differentiation against direct competitors. However, this misses the fact that there are often indirect alternatives users are always considering, as well as adjacent markets that are building into your functionality. As a result, you may end up creating a compelling product against direct competition, but not be compelling enough to capture another large market of users who are using indirect alternatives. Similarly, you may not be actively defending against encroaching adjacent markets. For example, if Substack only considered other publishing platforms like WordPress, Medium, or Ghost as competition, it might be tempted to simply build the publishing platform. However, building an app solely to beat existing publishing platforms means Substack might not differentiate itself very well against the full field of competition that it faces. It would miss out on the opportunity to potentially capture writers from indirect alternatives like Patreon, as well as from places like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Master PMs actively think about developing strategic differentiation versus not just direct competition, but also versus indirect alternatives and adjacent markets. In Substack's case, this means they decided to not just be a great publishing platform, but to also have a more holistic offering around being a writer itself. Instead of offering just a set of writing tools and a distribution platform, Substack also offers select writers subsidized access to health insurance, legal support, and in some cases, even a salary to help cover a transition to independent writing. To properly define your strategic differentiation, we'll use a two-step process. 1. Define your full field of competition. 2. Identify your unique attributes. As with the other strategic dimensions, this process is mapped out on the product strategy map template. The first step is defining your full field of competition so that you don't differentiate solely against your direct competitors. The full field of competition consists of 3 categories: direct competitors, indirect alternatives, and adjacent markets. The first are direct competitors. These are the competitors you traditionally think of, the ones with value propositions most closely related to your product. Since LinkedIn Sales Navigator fundamentally helps sales professionals discover leads, its direct competitors would be other lead gen tools like Hoovers, ZoomInfo, and Lead 411. Since Substack is a publishing platform that supports subscription-based payments, its direct competitors would be other publishing platforms with subscription-based payment capabilities. These would be companies like Ghost, Medium, WordPress, and Memberful. The second group of competitors are indirect alternatives. These are competitors that are in a different solution category but are still seen as a viable alternative choice. To brainstorm these, think about the other ways outside your direct competition in which users solve their problem. Or another common way to discover your indirect alternatives is to ask your customers how they would solve their problems without your product. For LinkedIn, these would be the other methods in which sales professionals discover leads, in this case through industry conferences. For Substack, this would be other methods in which their target audience publishes, such as via traditional media publications like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. Finally, the third group of competitors are companies in adjacent markets. These are companies that don't directly compete with you today, but offer closely related services. In a good scenario, they could offer interesting functionality to bring into or integrate with your solution. And in a bad scenario, they may start developing functionality that increasingly overlaps with your value proposition. The way to brainstorm these adjacent markets is to think about your user journey. Map out the touch points they experience before and after your product. The products that your user touches before and after your product will often be your adjacent market competitors. For example, for LinkedIn Sales Navigator, salespeople go through a standard journey when doing sales. Their first step is lead generation, where they get a list of people to reach out to. Then they actually have to reach out to them and monitor their conversation towards a sale, which is typically managed by sales acceleration tools like Yesware and Outreach, and CRM tools like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics. Finally, after the sale is complete, they'll have a post-sales phase where they focus on making sure the customer is happy using customer service tools like Zoho or Asana. In this example then, Sales Navigator's adjacent markets are the sales acceleration and CRM tools. Alternatively, think about the other ways that your users solve parts of their problem. In Substack's case, writers who look to get paid might turn to more general creator monetization platforms. These would be companies like Patreon and Gumroad. Then, once you've defined your competition, determine the unique attributes you have that make your product more compelling than the rest. These unique attributes aren't limited to product features. In many cases, they can also be elements like proprietary IP, talent, or business models. For example, at LinkedIn, their strategic differentiation was the breadth and up-to-date accuracy of their data. Even if competitors knew that up-to-date data was important, they couldn't easily recreate the same ecosystem and incentives for users to give them the same. For Substack, their strategic differentiation was to provide all the tools that an independent writer needs. They offered select writers healthcare and legal support, both of which were things that direct and adjacent market competitors like Medium and Patreon were unlikely to ever do. They also offered the writer full control over their audience and email list, something that traditional media publications would probably never do. By doing these things, Substack carved out a clear niche to serve. In summary, having a deep understanding of your strategic differentiation against not just your direct competition, but your full field of competition is key to understanding what it takes to build a compelling product for your audience. In the next lesson, you'll develop a deep understanding of your channel strategy.